Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A week in which the prestigious Lancet medical mag claimed that just one alcoholic drink a day, just one, shortened your life. Now, when I looked at the cumulative size of this show's Blue Nun bar bills, there was only one inescapable conclusion. The whole This Week team died 5 years ago. It's probably why the schedulers put us on so late, a suitable time for a show produced and presented by the living dead. I don't see our consumption subsiding, however. Events are conspiring to drive us even more to drink. This week, Donald Trump launched a missile attack on Syria, then declared he would bring peace to the Korean peninsula. What could possibly go wrong with that? Barman, just pass the bottle. In Britain, Jewish Labour MPs revealed a sickening catalogue of vile anti-Semitic abuse, nearly all of it, they thought, from left-wing supporters of their own party. At one stage, I had to pinch myself that I was watching the House of Commons in 2018 and not the Reichstag in 1932. And it's still not clear what the Labour leadership is going to do about this spreading stain on our national life. Barman, I'll have the same again, thanks. Then, just when you think British politics can't get any more depressing, along comes revelations of our treatment of the Windrush generation, a scandal so contemptible that it doesn't just demean the government that presided over it, but shames all of us who've allowed it to happen. It suddenly dawns on you that our country is letting in ISIS beheaders and torturers and enslavers to return to live among us because the going's got a bit tough for the poor dears in Syria. But it's prepared to contemplate the deportation of Caribbean grannies who've lived and worked here all their adult lives. Barman, just leave me the keys. I'm going to let myself out. Now, news comes ever thick and fast these days, and nothing is more certain than a 24-hour news cycle that changes everything, or until Donald Trump wakes up, switches on Fox and Friends, and starts tweeting. There's a widespread perception in America, I've just returned from there, that Fox News is the broadcasting arm of the Trump administration. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The Trump administration is the governing arm of Fox News, through which the broadcaster now runs the country. Back here in Blighty, just as you think the Maybot might actually be getting the hang of this governing business, the circuits blow and the limbs fall off. After Dear Jez's uncertain response to the nerve agent attack in Salisbury and Labour's unremitting and unresolved problems with anti-Semitism, it looked like the Tories were starting to edge ahead in the polls. Then came the scandal of the Windrush generation, an issue simmering on the back burner for too long, but which suddenly flared into the limelight, humiliating ministers, shaming the nation, and leaving folks wondering that perhaps robots aren't really human after all. Here's Richard Medley with his roundup of the week.
This week saw the government's and the opposition's dirty laundry aired in public. Well, I've got a few loads to shift myself, and Michael's gone off on holiday and left a fair bit for me to tackle as well. Thanks a lot, Michael. Still, at least it's a gorgeous day for it. Ah, how did these get in here? Michael must have forgotten to take them with him on holiday. Well, the government had more than a few tricky stains to get out over the Windrush generation of migrants. Promised the right to stay here in the UK, but unable to prove it once the Home Office had destroyed the relevant papers. Home Office Minister Caroline Noakes lathered up just a little bit too soon, admitting to government mistakes before the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary had a chance to.
We have made some mistakes, which we cannot continue to make, and I'm determined that we won't, because these people have contributed an enormous amount.
But the Home Secretary and the PM were eventually forced to apologise for the government's less than squeaky clean handling of the children of Windrush.
I am concerned that the Home Office has become too concerned with policy and strategy and sometimes lose sight of the individual.
I want to apologise to you today because we are genuinely sorry for any anxiety that has been caused.
Directly confronting the Prime Minister, Corbyn accused May of being personally responsible for this stain on her government's reputation.
Yesterday we learnt that in 2010 the Home Office destroyed landing cards for a generation of Commonwealth citizens and so have told people we can't find you in our system. Did the Prime Minister, the then Home Secretary, sign off that decision?
But Mrs May wouldn't let Corbyn washboard her.
No, the decision to destroy the landing cards was taken in 2009 under a Labour government.
But there are those who are saying that Mrs May's reputation over Windrush is not quite as squeaky clean as she'd like us to believe.
I think it was not just a question of the Home Secretary being told it was a challenging policy. The Prime Minister was as well, and this was a very contested piece of legislation across government departments. And there were some who saw it, I shan't name them, as almost reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the way it's working.
There's nothing better, I always think, than a nice, clean, pressed pair of white Y-fronts. Actually, Teresa, I think these are more your colour, aren't they?
I'll polish the leaves, make them green again, shake out the trees, change the scene again, spring cleaning, getting ready for love.
After that chemical weapons attack in Syria, Britain joined France and America in launching missile attacks on Assad's chemical weapons facilities. And Theresa May delivered an extremely robust defence of that.
I'm absolutely clear, Mr Speaker, that it is Parliament's responsibility to hold me to account for such decisions, and Parliament will do so. But it is my responsibility as Prime Minister to make these decisions, and I will make them.
Well, there was no fabric softener from Jeremy Corbyn. He pushed to make it harder for a government to take military action without the support of the Commons.
This statement serves as a reminder that the Prime Minister is accountable to this Parliament, not to the whims of the US President. We clearly need a War Powers Act in this country to transform a now broken convention into a legal obligation.
Turning up his nose at the smell of Corbyn's anti-war detergent was Jez's own backbencher, Chris Leslie.
Those who would turn a blind eye, who would do nothing in pursuit of some moral high ground, should also be held accountable for once today as well.
But refusing to scrub to the PM's rhythm, veteran Commons agitator Ken Clarke questioned the PM's decision to act without Commons approval.
She says there was a problem of time, but surely, once President Trump had announced to the world what he was proposing, a widespread debate was taking place everywhere, including many MPs in the media, but no debate in Parliament.
Hoping it'll all come out in the wash, Call Me Dave may have a few regrets, but surprisingly, calling the referendum on Brexit isn't one of them.
I don't regret holding a referendum. I think it was the right thing to do.
Well, he may not regret it, but many do, and ringing the Remona sentiment for all it's worth are 4 MPs from across the political spectrum who've got together to push for a campaign for the people's vote. Hope I haven't stretched this one too thin. Pegging their hopes on what they carefully avoided calling a second referendum, the 4 called for the public to have a vote on the final terms of the Brexit deal.
I think the best and the right thing to do is to now put it back to the people and say, you now vote on this deal on behalf of 65 million people who have a right to a people's vote.
And if the government had any hopes of an easy parliamentary ride on Brexit, well, they were pretty much mangled yesterday by a defeat in the Lords on the customs union.
That there are times in one's political career where what is alleged to be party loyalty comes way behind trying to stand up for the national interest. I intend to do that on this amendment. I intend to do it elsewhere during the report stage of this bill.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn's dirty laundry certainly overflowed from his wash basket this week, didn't it? With that parliamentary debate on anti-Semitism. Well, hoping to encourage their party to clean its act up were Jewish MPs Luciana Berger and Ruth Smeeth.
One anti-Semitic member of the Labour Party is one member too many. Yeah. Within the Labour Party, anti-Semitism is now more commonplace, it is more conspicuous, and it is more corrosive.
I've been the target of a campaign of abuse, attempted bullying and intimidation from people who would dare to tell me that people like me have no place in the party I have been a member of for over 20 years.
Ah, a lovely, clean pile of laundry. Oh, but what's this? A stubborn stain. I'm going to need something more caustic to get this out. Ah, this should do the trick.
A beautiful launderette, Richard Beadley there. Priti Patel, this mess over the Windrush generation, are the origins not a direct consequence of Mrs. May at the Home Office determined to create what she called a hostile environment for migrants?
Well, actually, I don't think they are. And I think this is a really awful situation that has come about. And I think, you know, the Home Office have got to get on top of this and do the right thing now, I think.
But the Home Office have
people that are involved. Of course they've caused it, but I think it's
wrong. But have they not caused it? Civil servants reflect the political direction that the politicians want them to go in. And she did want to create a hostile environment for illegal migrants and didn't see the consequences of what this would lead to with the Windrush generation, which had come here before they needed the paperwork.
Well, I think the point is,
isn't that right?
Her focus was illegal immigration. There's no doubt about that. I don't know whether or not this is an unintended consequence, and I hope it isn't.
Well, what other cause could there be?
Well, I have no idea, Andrew. I don't know the ins and outs of what happened in the Home Office back then.
Well, shouldn't we know that now, given what has happened
we will.
to the
I
Windrush
do
generation?
think we will find out. I've heard today that obviously there's more to come. There's greater scrutiny of the Home Office coming next week in Parliament, and rightly so. I think it's right that the public demand questions and
get testimony from people who were in government at the time as to how there was pressure on all departments to make sure that people couldn't access services, welfare, rental agreements and so on, unless they had the proper documentation. That came from the top down.
And there were changes, if you remember, there was an Immigration Act that came through, I think around 2015 too.
And the Windrush generation got
focused
corrupt.
on illegal immigration. So I don't
but they
know
got
how
classified as illegal, some of them, as a result of this. So it did come out of that.
Well, it could have come out of that policy situation. I just don't know. And these are the questions that I think the Home Office will have to answer. The Home Secretary will be going to the Select Committee next week, the Home Affairs Select Committee, and she will no doubt have to answer the background to all these questions.
Is there no mechanism in government in which, when you get yourself into a position that you are putting in a detention centre, some 61, 62-year-old person who's been here all their adult life, is there no mechanism which you say, prior to deportation?
How did they get here?
What are we doing here?
Yeah, how did they get there? Of course, there has to be some mechanism.
But there wasn't.
Well, that is, look, this is for the Home Office to answer all these questions. None of us, I think, here, I don't know, Alan, if you know, you've obviously spent some time in the Home Office, know the ins and outs in terms of even getting to that journey into the detention centre.
That's a good question, Alan. The decision to scrap the landing cards that the Windrush generation originally came with to this country, it was taken in 2009 when you were Home Secretary. Did you know about that?
No, and it was an administrative decision taken by UK Border Agency. And so they should. It wasn't just the Windrush landing card. It was these massive paperwork that built up over 50 years. And you have to remember also, we were introducing a biometric identity card compulsory for anyone coming in from outside the European Union. So we wouldn't have needed, the Windrush weren't involved in any of that. There was no threat to the Windrush generation. And just so it's an administrative decision, just as it was a year later when Theresa May was Home Secretary as my successor.
It was carried out.
And they were destroyed. They were carried out. That's when they were actually
So the decision was taken, but the destruction didn't happen
until another year. And that's where Jeremy was misled, because the previous evening, as I understand it, from reporters, there was, Number 10 were briefing that this happened in 2010. What she had up her sleeve, whether it was deliberate or whatever, all's fair in love and Prime Minister's questions, was that the decision was taken under us. But no, we weren't in any way. In fact, I reached a decision as Health Secretary and Home Secretary when we were looking at this that no one should be denied medical, because we're all worried about illegal immigration, incidentally. You know,
have you used the phrase hostile environment?
No, I don't. Ian Martin said it on Question Time.
Ian Dale, I think it was.
Ian Dale, was it?
Have you?
I can't remember every word I uttered
No, I know.
as Home Secretary. But saying there's going to be a hostile environment for people who come here illegally actually is not a terrible thing. Saying you're going to make it, you're actually going to include in that hostile environment people who came over here and were given British nationality and have been living here for years, withdrawing their medical care, losing their jobs, losing their driving licence is horrendous.
Absolutely, it's completely wrong.
And it did come, not just Theresa May, Nick Timothy's got a role in this, because I know, because she was my successor, you pick up what's happening. They went in, we're going to get net migration down to the tens of thousands, an impossible pipe dream, and they cracked down very hard. So, for instance, I know as a constituency MP, you might have had this, Pretty, people who were interpreters for the British Army in Afghanistan, where you never had a problem before. As soon as you made that clear, that was it. But no, that was no longer a hard and fast case to get that.
And there were some well-documented cases back then. Interpreters were one, but also don't forget, part of this clamping down was obviously bogus colleges and things of that nature as well. So I think the point is the focus was rightly on illegal immigration.
But the Windrush people got caught up in the wash.
Well, of course.
Of doing this.
Well, somehow they have now.
And nobody seemed to be able to step in and say, hold on, this isn't for, this is not for them.
But is it just the Windrush generation?
Until the media gave it publicity.
I wouldn't call, I mean, Amber Rudd, I think, you know, she's in a difficult job, and I certainly wouldn't call for her head, but I think she was wrong to suggest to blame officials, because, you know, what you do as a cabinet minister, whatever party you're from, is you take the knock. And in actual fact, I would be very, very, you know, from my experience in the Home Office, very surprised if that wasn't driven from the top, with the special advisors and rest bearing down on Home Office officials. Look, we've got to get these figures.
Because of the numbers.
Because of the numbers.
Let me move on to the Customs Union. The House of Lords has voted that Britain should stay in the Customs Union even as it leaves the European Union. The stories in the papers tomorrow will show that the European Union has thrown the government's proposals for what the customs arrangement should be back in their face, that they don't want anything to do with them. You could lose on this, couldn't you? There may not be a majority for a customs union in the House of Commons.
So look, I think it's tricky, but I think, to be fair, in the House of Lords, we knew this would not be an easy ride at all. I think, you know, this was always on the table in terms of the customs union. I think the reality is, you know, the Lords are right to have the scrutiny of the bill, have the debates that they are having. But I do think now, and I haven't seen the reports in tomorrow's papers, but I do think the government will, you know, it's got to come back to the House of Commons. We're going to have to debate all the amendments and have the discussions all over again. But the government will have to come up, obviously, with the right kind of measures that obviously will look to address the questions, the wider questions around customs, delivery.
Sure. But it has. It's made these proposals to the European Union, and Mr Barnier says none of them is workable. Now, it's a negotiation. That may change. But my question is, if the Lords has voted that way, that's the attitude of the EU, I'm not sure there is a majority in the Commons for a customs union.
I think...
for coming out of the union.
Customs union. Look, I think this has got to come back to the House, and obviously we will have the discussion at the time. But I think in terms of what Barnier is saying as well, that is something for the Brexit team and obviously the Prime Minister as part of the negotiations.
Could you contemplate a Brexit and still stay in the customs union?
No, I don't think we can have a hokey-cokey option where we've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think, you know, the Prime Minister has been pretty clear from day one, and I know it's been a challenging year on Brexit, full stop, that she's, you know, she wants to deliver on the vote that the British public voted for in the referendum. So to be authentic and stay true to that, we're going to have to find the right arrangements on the customs question.
This becomes quite a big issue now, I would suggest.
Yes.
Because it's not clear that there's a majority in the Commons for the government's policy on the customs union.
No, I think they're going to get defeated in the Commons, and I think they're going to get defeated for good reason. You know, all the debate, me and Pretty were on different sides in the debate, but what most people said who wanted to come out, sane, rational people, you know, they said, look, fine going in the common market, but it's changed. The common market was the customs union. The single market came afterwards. The common market was the customs union. If they were satisfied with anything, they were satisfied with that. And there were no intricate debates about the customs union. Of course, why should... But for the government to just give that up, they should be hanging on to that and say, look, we're coming out of the European Union, but this is about our economic future.
Well, let's see. It's going to be a big vote in the Commons, I think.
Well, it's going to come back in a big way to the House of Commons.
Yeah, yeah.